Pakistani airstrikes have targeted multiple suspected hideouts of the Pakistani Taliban in neighboring Afghanistan. We're talking about the TTP.
Currently, how tense the situation is between the two countries can be sensed from this strike by Pakistan on the Afghanistan border region. There were 46 people killed, mostly women and children, says the Taliban. Pakistan justified these as targeted attacks on the training center of insurgents in Afghanistan, but the Taliban denounced it, saying that the victims were refugees from the Waziristan region. The Taliban government vowed to retaliate. 4 days later, the Taliban Defense Ministry claimed to target multiple Pakistani points. According to the Taliban government, these Pakistani points served as centers and hideouts for malicious elements who organized and coordinated attacks in Afghanistan. The way the situation is unfolding in the region between the two countries is unprecedented. The Taliban was once the closest ally of Pakistan. The relationship between the two ran so deep that Pakistan was ready to take every risk for the Taliban. But what went wrong suddenly? Pakistan, which was waiting to see the ascension of the Taliban in Afghanistan, is now bombarding the Taliban-led country. Before we get into the rivalry, let's talk about old friendships. It was in October 1999 when the Security Council first passed a resolution imposing sanctions on the Taliban. The charges against the Taliban were that the group was providing shelter, support and training to international terrorists, including indicted terrorist Osama bin Laden. The sanction list further expanded, including an assets freeze, travel ban and an arms embargo affecting the Taliban. However, these sanctions proved completely futile as Pakistan was continuously, though secretly, supporting the Taliban with arms and weapons. There were continuous reports of the involvement of Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI, and the army in planning major Taliban military operations. The extent of this support attracted widespread international criticism. In November 2000, the UN Secretary General implicitly accused Pakistan of providing such support. In April and May 2001, Human Rights Watch reported that up to 30 trucks a day were crossing the Pakistan border, and some of these convoys were carrying artillery shells, tank rounds, and rocket-propelled grenades. Such deliveries were in direct violation of United Nations sanctions. But Pakistan was doing all this to secure its own security goals. The relationship with the Taliban, a group made of Pashtuns, provided strategic depth with a secure Afghan frontier. Pakistan also promoted the emergence of the Taliban in Afghanistan, which espoused an Islamist rather than a nationalist agenda. An Islamist agenda reduced the nationalist aspiration of Pashtun tribes of Pakistan, whose territories straddled the Pakistan-Afghan border. When Pakistan was busy overruling UN sanctions on the Taliban, a major event happened that transformed the entire history of the world, and so did the Pakistan-Taliban relationship. "9/11 transformed the entire world. After the US investigation, it was concluded that Al-Qaeda planned and executed the September 11 attack, and the mastermind behind it was Al-Qaeda's leader Osama bin Laden. The Taliban was harboring Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. The US demanded the Taliban deliver bin Laden and Al-Qaeda or face war. The Taliban's founder and leader Muhammad Umar, aka Mullah Umar, rejected the demand. The then President George W. Bush's message to the Taliban was clear.
By aiding and abetting murder, the Taliban regime is committing murder.
On this ground, the US, along with British, Canadian and Australian forces, with other countries providing logistical support, began military operations in Afghanistan. On October 7, 2001, the US made the first strike, targeting 31 locations across the country. Most of the Taliban's outdated SA-2 and SA-3 surface-to-air missiles, a small fleet of MiG-21s and Su-22s, and radar and command units were destroyed on the first night. In a month's time, by November, the capital city Kabul fell, with the Taliban abandoning the city. By the end of November, Kandahar fell, with many Taliban members surrendering. In December 2001, Hamid Karzai was elected to lead the Afghan interim administration. That's how the official rule of the Taliban ended in Afghanistan, only to emerge as an insurgent group, waging attacks against the American-led war in the country for the next 2 decades. The retreat was a few months hiatus, as the Taliban forces returned as an insurgent group and started attacking American and Afghan government forces. 3 years later, by 2005, they started emerging as a sustained military. That year, the number of Americans killed in Afghanistan nearly doubled from the previous year to almost 100. By 2006, intense fighting had broken out in Afghanistan between NATO forces and a resurgent Taliban. In the southern part of the country, they were now deploying fighters in large numbers. The Taliban launched ambushes, suicide bombings, and roadside IED attacks across the south and east. Suicide bombings, almost unheard of before 2003, rose sharply to 160 by 2007. Pakistan's border region was the base for the Taliban, who were recruiting fighters from the country to die in the faraway land of Afghanistan. The Taliban activity in Pakistan remained unchecked, giving strength to the Taliban to continue their insurgency in Afghanistan even after losing the country. Pakistan's soured relationship with the Hamid Karzai government ratified the country's belief that the only Taliban could provide them strategic depth in Afghanistan. Thus, the resurgence of the Taliban was good news for Pakistan, and they wanted to help the group in some ways. On August 15, 2021, after 3 months of a major offensive, the Taliban announced the capture of Kabul. This marked the iconic scene of the victory of the Taliban in Afghanistan. It wasn't pleasant to watch the people sacrificing their lives to flee the country which would now be ruled by the Taliban. While the world was watching the withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan, Pakistan welcomed the arrival of the Taliban. The then Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan equated the Taliban's return to power with Afghans having broken the shackles of slavery. Pakistan's Interior Minister at the time, Sheikh Rashid, claimed that the Taliban's swift ascendance to power would create a new bloc and the region would reach great global importance. Pakistan's support for the Taliban was always based on the hypothesis that since they replaced nationalism with Islamism, it would give them strategic depth. It seems like this calculation was completely wrong from the beginning. Now the Taliban, after coming back to power in Kabul, is operating as an independent state with its own priorities and challenges. The Taliban has always refused to accept the Durand Line as the international border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. They call it the supposed line. The border skirmishes along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border have been a recurring problem, and it has only increased since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan in August 2021. That's not the only challenge. While Pakistan was supporting the Afghan Taliban, they witnessed the emergence of the Pakistan Taliban, also called Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan or TTP. The TTP wants Islamic rule in Pakistan. It has been involved in multiple attacks in Pakistan targeting military personnel and civilians alike. The TTP's training base is in Afghanistan, from where they execute their activities in Pakistan. Pakistan was of the opinion that the Afghan Taliban would be able to tame the TTP group once they were back in power in Afghanistan. But the exact opposite has happened. Emboldened by the re-emergence of the Taliban as the government in Afghanistan, the TTP has increased its attacks in Pakistan. In 2023 alone, more than 300 terrorist attacks happened in Pakistan, with a vast majority of them claimed by the TTP. With the Taliban unwilling or incapable of stopping the terror inside Afghanistan, Pakistan has also been carrying out strikes inside Afghan territory to target terrorists. In a recent aerial strike, Pakistan claimed to target the terrorist base of the TTP, which the Taliban denounced vehemently.
calling it strikes on innocent refugees from the Waziristan region. This time, the Taliban also replied with attacks on various military points in Pakistan. The future of Pakistan-Afghanistan relations remains uncertain as the Taliban faces significant challenges. Pakistan has realized it must independently counter the TTP, but continues urging the Taliban to prevent the group from using Afghan territory against it. However, the Taliban's ideological alignment with the TTP and local support in southeastern Afghanistan hinder such action. They fear backlash within their ranks and the risk of TTP members aligning with groups like Daesh or Al-Qaeda. Additionally, acting against the TTP at Pakistan's behest risk perception of being puppets of Islamabad. The Taliban's refusal to recognize the Durand Line further underscores their stance as independent Afghan nationalists, likely increasing tensions with Pakistan.